The words landed like a thunderclap. In a single moment, global markets trembled, diplomats scrambled for their phones, and military analysts leaned forward in their chairs. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, was considering military strikes on Iran, not authorizing, not announcing, considering. But in geopolitics, sometimes a single word can feel louder than the sound of jets breaking the sound barrier. Because when the leader of the world's most powerful military says an option is on the table, the world listens. Behind that single phrase lies a region already stretched to its limit. The Middle East has lived for decades on a razor's edge, balancing rivalries, alliances, and long memories of conflict. Now the tension is rising again. Washington's warnings have grown sharper. Tehran's responses have grown firmer. And the question echoing across capitals from London to Riyadh to Tel Aviv is no longer whether tensions are high. It's how high they can go before something gives. In Washington, the atmosphere feels charged. Advisors are weighing intelligence reports. Defense officials are assessing capabilities and consequences. The Pentagon has long maintained detailed contingency plans for nearly every scenario imaginable, and any potential strike would not be improvised. It would be calculated, modeled, rehearsed. Targets would be evaluated for strategic value. Risks would be mapped. Fallout would be projected in scenarios that stretch far beyond a single night of airstrikes. Military action, even if described as limited, rarely stays neatly contained. In Tehran, the message is equally resolute. Iranian leaders have insisted they will not negotiate under pressure. They frame American threats as political theater, designed to project strength at home and abroad. Yet beneath the rhetoric, there is unmistakable awareness of the stakes. Iran's military leadership understands the imbalance of power in conventional terms. At the same time, it also knows that asymmetric responses can complicate any straightforward show of force. The calculus is complex. Deterrence, pride, survival, and leverage are all intertwined. For President Trump, the language of strength has always been central. Throughout his political career, he has projected decisiveness, unpredictability, and willingness to challenge established norms. Supporters argue that this unpredictability is itself a strategy, keeping adversaries off balance. Critics counter that ambiguity in matters of war can be destabilizing. Now, with the possibility of strikes openly acknowledged, both interpretations collide in real time. Is this a pressure tactic designed to force concessions? Or is it the prelude to something more concrete? The international community watches with a mix of anxiety and calculation. European leaders, many of whom have tried to preserve diplomatic channels with Iran, are urging restraint. Gulf states, long wary of Iranian influence, quietly assess what American action might mean for their own security. Israel, which has repeatedly warned about Iran's regional ambitions and military capabilities, views the situation through a lens shaped by immediate threat perception. Every actor has its own red lines, its own fears, its own interests, and yet none of them can control what happens if the first missile is launched. Markets react not just to events, but to possibilities. Oil prices inch upward on the mere suggestion of escalation. Investors calculate shipping risks in the Strait of Hormuz. Energy analysts revisit contingency plans for disrupted supply chains. Even before any action occurs, the ripple effects begin. In an interconnected world, uncertainty itself becomes an economic force. The military dimension is only one layer of the story. Diplomacy continues behind closed doors. Envoys speak in cautious phrases. Proposals are drafted and redrafted. Back channels, often invisible to the public, hum with activity. History shows that moments of peak tension sometimes produce breakthrough agreements. It also shows that miscalculations can spiral faster than anyone anticipates. The margin for error narrows as rhetoric intensifies. What makes this moment particularly combustible is the broader context. Regional conflicts are already simmering. Alliances are shifting. Non-state actors operate in shadowy spaces where attribution is murky and retaliation is complicated. A single strike, even if intended as a warning, could trigger responses through proxies, cyber operations, or economic measures. The battlefield of the 21st century is not confined to physical geography. It spans digital infrastructure, global finance, and political narratives. Public opinion plays its own role. In the United States, Americans are divided. Some argue that a firm response is necessary to prevent long-term threats from solidifying. Others warn of another entanglement in a region where past interventions have carried heavy costs. Memories of Iraq and Afghanistan linger in the national consciousness. War is never just a headline, it becomes a generational imprint. In Iran, nationalism often intensifies under external pressure. Even citizens critical of their government can rally against foreign threats. Leaders understand this dynamic, so do strategists in Washington. The interplay between external pressure and internal cohesion is one of the most delicate aspects of the entire equation. Actions meant to weaken a regime can sometimes strengthen its domestic standing. The phrase "considering military strikes" carries deliberate ambiguity. It signals seriousness without committing to action. It creates leverage while preserving flexibility. Yet it also raises expectations. If no action follows, critics may frame it as empty posturing. If action does follow, it will be scrutinized for proportionality and legality. Every path carries political consequences. Military planners understand that modern warfare unfolds under the constant gaze of global media. Satellite imagery can reveal damage within hours. Social media can amplify narratives within minutes. Information warfare becomes intertwined with kinetic action. Whoever controls the story can shape perceptions of victory or defeat. That reality adds another layer to the strategic landscape. The human dimension, often lost in geopolitical analysis, remains central. Civilians in the region fear instability. Families in both countries worry about escalation. Soldiers, if called upon, would execute orders shaped by decisions far above their rank. Behind the rhetoric are real lives that could be altered irrevocably by a single command. Allies and adversaries alike are studying signals. Is the rhetoric accompanied by troop movements? Are carrier strike groups repositioning? Are air defense systems being deployed? Intelligence communities around the world sift through satellite feeds and intercepted communications, searching for indicators. The absence of visible buildup can signal caution. The presence of quiet preparation can signal inevitability. There is also the strategic question of objectives. What would a strike seek to accomplish? Deterrence, degradation of capabilities, a message to domestic audiences. Clear objectives are essential in military action. Without them, operations can drift, expanding beyond their initial scope. Policymakers know this, yet clarity is often hardest to achieve when political pressures mount. History offers lessons, but not certainty. Past confrontations between Washington and Tehran have oscillated between open hostility and uneasy restraint. Moments of crisis have been followed by de-escalation, only for tensions to rise again. The pattern suggests a relationship defined by cycles rather than resolution. This latest moment could fit that pattern, or it could break it. The global balance of power forms the backdrop. Major powers observe carefully, measuring how American resolve manifests. Actions taken in one theater can reverberate in others. Decisions about Iran are not viewed in isolation. They are interpreted as signals about broader strategy and credibility. In a world of strategic competition, perception is often as significant as capability. As the days unfold, language will matter. Statements will be parsed for nuance. Words like imminent, limited, proportional, and defensive will carry weight. Diplomats will seek off-ramps. Military officials will refine options. The president's next sentence could either cool the temperature or raise it further. For now, the world sits in a state of suspended anticipation. The possibility of strikes exists in that tense space between rhetoric and reality. It is a reminder of how fragile stability can be, how quickly calculations can shift. One announcement has reopened debates about deterrence, diplomacy, and the cost of confrontation. The story is not yet written. It hangs in the balance of decisions being shaped in secure rooms and quiet conversations. Whether this moment becomes another chapter in a long-running standoff or the spark that ignites something larger will depend on choices made in the coming hours and days. The only certainty is that the stakes are immense, and the consequences, if action is taken, would echo far beyond the initial flash of impact. As uncertainty stretches on, the psychological dimension of this standoff grows more intense. In geopolitical crises, perception can become as powerful as firepower. Every speech, every social media post, every carefully worded press briefing becomes part of a larger chess match. Leaders are not only calculating military capabilities, they are measuring resolve, credibility, and the limits of endurance. In that arena, hesitation can be interpreted as weakness, but overreach can trigger consequences that spiral beyond control. President Trump's approach to international crises has often centered on projecting maximum leverage. By signaling willingness to use force, he amplifies pressure without immediately crossing the threshold into conflict. Supporters view this as negotiation through strength. Critics warn that signaling without clarity risks misinterpretation. In high-stakes confrontations, adversaries may prepare for worst-case scenarios, even if the intent is coercive diplomacy rather than imminent attack. Iran's leadership, seasoned by decades of sanctions and confrontation, is unlikely to respond passively to threats. Its strategy has often relied on patience, calibrated responses, and indirect leverage across the region. The country's influence extends through networks and partnerships that complicate any straightforward military engagement. If strikes were to occur, the response might not mirror the initial action. It could unfold in asymmetric ways, targeting vulnerabilities far from the original flashpoint. The military balance between the United States and Iran is uneven in conventional terms. American air power and precision capabilities are formidable, yet warfare in the modern era rarely hinges solely on conventional comparisons. Geography matters. Iran's strategic depth, terrain, and defensive systems are designed to raise the cost of attack. Even a limited strike would require navigating air defenses and anticipating countermeasures. The objective might be narrow, but the operational complexity would be vast. Regional actors are recalibrating their own strategies. Gulf states consider the implications for their security infrastructure. Israel evaluates how any American action aligns with its long-standing warnings about Iranian capabilities. European governments, caught between alliance commitments and diplomatic engagement, urge caution. Each capital conducts its own internal debate, weighing solidarity against self-preservation. The economic undercurrents intensify. Global markets abhor uncertainty, and the mere prospect of escalation can shift billions in valuation. Energy traders factor in potential disruptions to shipping lanes. Insurance rates for cargo shipments adjust. Corporations revisit contingency plans. Even without a single shot fired, the cost of tension accumulates. In Washington, political calculations intertwine with strategic ones. A decision to strike would be framed domestically as either decisive leadership or reckless escalation, depending on perspective. Lawmakers would debate authorization, oversight, and objectives. Public opinion could shift rapidly if conflict expands or casualties mount. The memory of prolonged wars looms over any discussion of military engagement. Within Iran, leaders balance external defiance with internal management. Economic pressures have weighed heavily on the population, yet external threats can consolidate authority. The narrative of resistance against foreign aggression resonates deeply in national identity. This dynamic complicates assumptions that pressure alone can produce concessions. Communication channels, formal and informal, remain critical. History has shown that even adversaries maintain lines of contact during crises to prevent miscalculation. Deconfliction mechanisms, back-channel diplomacy, and third-party intermediaries can serve as safety valves. The question is whether those channels remain robust enough to withstand escalating rhetoric. The role of technology in modern conflict cannot be overstated. Cyber capabilities introduce an additional dimension. Retaliation may not come in the form of missiles alone. Critical infrastructure, financial networks, and information systems can become targets. Attribution in cyberspace is often murky, complicating response decisions. A cyber exchange could unfold below the threshold of open warfare while still inflicting significant disruption. Strategic messaging is crafted with multiple audiences in mind. When President Trump speaks about considering strikes, the message travels simultaneously to domestic voters, foreign adversaries, allies, and global markets. Each audience interprets the signal differently. The art of statecraft lies in balancing those interpretations without triggering unintended reactions. Military doctrine emphasizes clarity of mission. If action is taken, objectives must be defined with precision. Is the goal to deter future actions, to degrade specific capabilities, to signal resolve? Without clearly articulated aims, even successful tactical operations can fail strategically. The aftermath of any strike would require careful management to prevent escalation. Time itself becomes a factor. The longer uncertainty persists, the more pressure builds. Deadlines, whether public or private, compress decision-making. Intelligence assessments evolve. Diplomatic efforts intensify or stall. The window for de-escalation can narrow as positions harden. The broader geopolitical landscape frames every move. Major powers observe closely, evaluating how American decisions reflect on global leadership. Strategic competitors may interpret action or restraint as signals relevant beyond the Middle East. Alliances are reinforced or tested in moments like these. At the human level, fear and fatigue coexist. Civilians in the region have endured cycles of tension before. They understand how quickly headlines can translate into sirens. Families in the United States watch developments with concern, aware that military action carries consequences not only abroad but at home. Service members prepare for contingencies, embodying the bridge between policy and action. Media coverage amplifies urgency. Analysts debate scenarios. Former officials share insights. Speculation fills the gaps between official statements. In the digital age, narratives can outpace verified information. Managing perception becomes as crucial as managing operations. Diplomacy, though quieter, continues to operate. Negotiators explore compromises. Proposals circulate. Even as rhetoric sharpens, incentives for avoiding open conflict remain strong. War carries unpredictable costs. Leaders on all sides understand that escalation can exceed initial intentions. The concept of deterrence underpins much of the current dynamic. By signaling readiness to strike, the United States aims to shape Iranian calculations. By signaling readiness to respond, Iran aims to shape American restraint. Deterrence is a psychological contest. It succeeds when neither side crosses the threshold, yet deterrence can fail through misinterpretation. Signals meant as warnings can be perceived as preparations for imminent attack. Defensive measures can be mistaken for offensive positioning. In high-alert environments, small incidents can trigger outsized reactions. As the world watches, the next moves remain uncertain. Will diplomatic efforts yield concessions that reduce tensions? Will rhetoric cool as both sides reassess risks? Or will events accelerate beyond control? The answers lie not only in public statements, but in confidential deliberations. What is clear is that the phrase "considering military strikes" has already altered the strategic environment. It has raised expectations, intensified scrutiny, and injected volatility into global calculations. Whether it becomes a footnote in a tense negotiation or the prelude to confrontation depends on choices still unfolding. For now, the world remains suspended between possibility and action. Leaders weigh consequences measured not only in military metrics, but in political, economic, and human terms. The gravity of the moment is undeniable. In the calculus of power, words can be weapons, and decisions can echo for generations. The story continues in real time, shaped by caution, ambition, fear, and resolve. The stakes extend far beyond a single headline. They encompass regional stability, global markets, and the lives of countless individuals whose futures hinge on decisions made in the shadows of power. Until clarity emerges, anticipation itself becomes the defining feature of this crisis, a reminder of how fragile equilibrium can be in a world where strength and restraint must coexist in uneasy balance.